Hey guys, so today we're going to do an IS300 2JZ-GE VVT-i going into an IS200 plug and play and retaining the automatic gearbox. So let's get into it. Right guys, so as I said, this is a 2JZ-GE VVT-i from an IS300. It's going into an IS200. It is plug and play, and the customer is retaining the 5-speed automatic gearbox from the IS300. Okay, so as you can see, this is an adapted harness. So we've taken the customer's original IS300 engine harness, we've completely stripped it down, cleaned everything up, retaped it up, replaced any cases that needed replacing, and we've obviously made it completely plug and play for the Lexus IS200. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to go through the photos and show you what that process entails, obviously stripping everything down, cleaning everything up, etc. So let's do that now, back in a second. Right, so there you go. You can see basically the process that we go through there. All right, so what we're going to do today is the same as we do all the time. So if you watch a lot of our videos, this is no surprise to you, but we're going to go through the layout of the harness first. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go and jump into the testing. And again, 2 sections, so one with the ignition on and one with the engine actually running as well. Okay. Right, so for the layout, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some of the harness, and then obviously the inlet manifold is blocking some of the harness there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the ECU box, we'll get up to there, we'll go over there, that side, etc. Then I'm going to pause, we're going to take the intake manifold off, and I'm going to show you how the rest of it goes underneath there. So, starting at the ECU box over here, again, nice and simple. If you've seen our 3UZ swaps, it's very similar because they have the same style of ECU. So it is what I call the wedge-shaped style of ECU, so really straightforward there. You have your 3 plugs here, 1, 2, and 3. So that's basically your engine harness side. We then have the 2 plugs here, which are obviously the body plugs normally in the IS300, and they have now been adapted to the 2 IS200 plugs that are over there as well. Now then, in terms of the other body plugs, we have our gray plug here. This would normally be a black plug in IS200, but we've utilized the existing IS300 plug, which is a white one. And the blue one, we've only left 1 wire in there, and I'll go through that in a minute. So, ECU wise, as you can see, if you've got a standard IS200 box, it's not going to slide directly in. If you're lucky enough with the engine and the harness to manage get an IS200 ECU box, and that's absolutely great, you can just unbolt your IS200 box, bolt in your IS200 box, and this will slide directly in, no problems at all. If not, and you don't have access to the IS200 box, again, like the 3UZ, you can do the exact same process. So you can basically unbolt these 2 bolts over here, unbolt these 2 screws, sorry, undo these 2 screws there, those 2 screws there. You pull this whole section out with the PCB board on, and you can take an angle grinder and you can angle grind this lip off, and then the whole thing will just slot straight in. So again, really, really nice and simple, nothing too complicated there. Okay, we have our little junction box over here. This one's still got the white frame on, which is actually that white frame over there. Okay, so these can be removed as an individual item, and you can see here this can also be removed as an individual item. If you look in the top here, you'll see there's a little sort of flap that you can lift up, and this white thing will just push off. Okay, so if your IS200 box already has this white thing like mine does here, you can basically put a screwdriver in there, pull this white frame up, and then put this blue directly into there where it would normally go. Straight, really, really straightforward. Okay. Right, so getting back to the blue plug over here, obviously normally on an IS200 Auto you'd have no plug there at all, but with the IS300, if you guys weren't aware, the actual ECU can control the cooling fans. Now obviously this functionality is not present in the IS200, but what we decided to do is we've left this wire there so that the customer ever wanted to change their mind and they did want to control the fans via the ECU as well. Perfectly something that they can do, and obviously in this case there's nothing underneath that particular thing, so this wire currently isn't going anywhere, but we are leaving it in there rather than removing it like we would normally do. Okay. After that, we're going to end up at our grommet. Straightforward, the grommet goes right in there, nothing too complicated there. After the grommet, a small section where we tape up, and then we have the igniter. Okay, so this is the igniter that came with the harness. Obviously we're using that to test it out as well. The igniter is mounted on the strut tower here. Okay, so that's perfectly fine. You should have the mounting points available that you do on the IS200. Okay, So that's that section over there. Then the harness moves up, goes through this little bracket over here if you've still got it on your engine. Comes along, and then it's going to go into a plastic section here where it splits up and goes its separate ways. Okay. Now then, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go underneath, because there's a section that actually pops down underneath through there. We'll go there, then we'll come back up and we'll go over the top over there, across down there, and then obviously I'll remove the intake manifold and we can have a look underneath there as well. Okay, so starting from here, hopefully you can see with the light, but just over there, there's a little section that pops down over there. Really, really nice and simple. And you'll see that there's two sort of sections that go with it. So this first section at the back over there, that actually includes your alternator main thick cable. Okay, so hopefully you can see it, but it pops out over there. It goes down along there, and you can follow it with my finger there. Goes along through there, and that's going to bolt directly into your fuse box in front of your battery like that. It's got the clip and everything on it ready to clip in. So again, super nice and simple and straightforward, because obviously these boxes are the same between the IS200 and the IS300. Okay. The next one that pops out over there is going to be your power steering pressure switch. Okay, so obviously we fit these because they will cause a code if they are not connected. And obviously, if you are swapping an IS300 2JZ-GE VVT-i into an IS200, you're more than likely going to need to take the IS300 power steering lines, and in which case, it will have this pressure sensor so you can connect it and it will work. If for whatever reason you don't do that, then by all means, this is just an IS200 manifold pressure sensor. All Toyota pressure sensor plugs like this are exactly the same pinout. So you can just plug this in, tuck it out the way and leave it, and then you won't get a code for a power steering pressure sensor. Right, so that's that little section at the back there. Moving along, and you see this section that comes down the front here. The first thing that comes off is your coolant temperature sensor. So that's the black connector there, the 2-wire one that goes there. Okay. Really nice and straightforward. Also coming out here, sorry, it's a bit of a bunch of wires here. Also coming out here is going to be an earth strap, and that bolts here directly under the manifold. Again, nice, simple, and straightforward. Also coming out here, which is this one over here, is going to go to your oil pressure switch. So that's part of your oil filter housing that goes over there. Also coming out there is then going to be your knock sensor, which is right at the back over there. I probably won't be able to get it to focus that nicely, but you can see there, just plugs in straight over there. So that's knock sensor 1, because that covers cylinders 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Right. Also coming out here is going to be this one, which is going to pop down to here, and I'm going to get my hand out the way. But there's your oil level switch. So that then plugs in directly over there. And the last section that comes out over there is going to go to your AC compressor pump. All right. All right, that's that section over there. All right, what I might do as well is just move over a tad, and there's another section that pops down underneath here. See if I can get my camera to get in here. Okay, so again, nice and simple with this section. It just has a little bit of plastic that comes out there. One section comes out straight and goes right to your earthing point over there. Super simple. Another plug comes out here and goes to your ACIS valve. So this is a vacuum solenoid valve for the ACIS system, and that acoustic control induction system. And then lastly, or second lastly, coming down here, and it splits up a little bit down on the bottom here, but then it goes to your starter solenoid over there. So that just plugs in with that gray plug over there. Can't really get that out the way all that well, but there's the gray plug over there. And then lastly is your second knock sensor. So that's the one for cylinder 4, 5, and 6. So that then comes over there. Okay, so again, it comes through the manifold. There's your piece of plastic that we'll see in a minute when I pull the manifold off, but it comes straight down through there. Right, so that's everything underneath there now, simple and straightforward. Again, obviously all of that can be plugged in with the inlet manifold off while you put in the harness on for the first time. All right, moving along from here, we have our plastic section that's going to come over the top over here, and we're going to break out and go to our ignition coil plugs. There is only 3 of them. They are at the correct length to go to the correct coil, so you can't really get them mixed up. Obviously, we can only see 2 of them currently, but there is the first plug, and there is the last plug over there. Okay, now just remember, it is a wasted spark firing order. So in actual fact, this one is on cylinder 2, because there's cylinder 1. This one is on cylinder 6, which is then joined by that one to cylinder 1. Okay, so it's 1 and 6. So this is actually referred to as ignition 1, because that's going to fire 1 and 6. This one is referred to as 2 and 5, because it goes from 2 and then it comes all the way across there and goes to cylinder 5 over there. And inside underneath, when you have a look, you'll see there's a short little HT lead, and that goes to cylinder 3 and 4. Okay, so that's basically how it works. It's really, really weird, but you've got 1, 2, and then 3 is in the middle there. So that's kind of how they're numbered, and it's how you sort of know what's going on where. Okay. Now, from this plastic over here, because this is directly in the way, I'm just going to say this is the VVT-i oil control valve. It comes out here, and we'll see it better when you pull the inlet manifold, so we'll come back to that in a minute. The only thing that you won't see better is going to be your noise filter. Okay. So it's got basically a capacitor, and it's connected to the power for all of the coils and injectors, and obviously it suppresses any noise, electromagnetic noise that would be made by those particular things like the coils and the injectors. Okay. Also coming out of that section over there is going to be your TPS, so that's your throttle position sensor. This one's connected directly to the blade of the actual throttle itself, and obviously measuring the position there. Okay. Moving along from there, and it's going to break out at the end of the engine here. So I'm trying to get good shots here. It's going to break out at the end of the engine here, and it's going to make its way along here. Now, normally you guys have like a little metal bracket or something over there that obviously protects it from the exhaust heat and so on. I've obviously pulled that off because this comes apart very, very often. But anyway, section that breaks out over there is going to go to your drive-by-wire motor plug. So you see there's your drive-by-wire motor, and in there you've got your positive and your negative for your motor, and you've got your positive and negative for your drive-by-wire clutch. So this is what they call a clutch drive-by-wire system. There's a clutch in there that activates via the ECU, which then allows the motor to be attached to the actual throttle blade. And obviously if the ECU detects any problems, it can turn that clutch off, and then the motor and the throttle blade are no longer connected anymore, and therefore it can shut the throttle down completely. Okay. Moving along, the harness is going to travel underneath there like that, and it's going to break up just sort of underneath here. And the first section is going to go to your accelerator pedal position sensor. Okay. So this stands for Electronic Throttle Control System Intelligent. Okay. They had to do that because if you look at the JZ-100, they call it ETCS, but basically that system was a non-drive-by-wire system, but it had a stepper motor which controlled a second throttle blade. Okay, and that was your traction control. So that's how it shut the throttle for the traction control. And they call that ETCS. The I makes it drive-by-wire, basically. Okay, that's the difference between ETCS and ETCS-I. All right, so that is your accelerator position sensor. That is your drive-by-wire motor, and that is your TPS. So those are the 3 components that make up the electronic drive-by-wire throttle. All right. Now, this system, same as the IS200, same as the one you said VVT-i, because they still physically have a cable attached to it. Basically, the reason for that, okay, is that if the throttle ever shut down, you still had like a limp home mode. Okay, so I'm going to keep quiet now. I'm going to move the throttle, and you're going to see that the blade, or you're going to hear the blade is not moving at all. Okay, so see there, absolutely no bladed movement at all. Okay, but what you will notice is eventually I get to a point where the throttle seems to stop. Okay, you have to take my word for it, but yeah, so there, comes to a stop there. All right, now listen to this. Okay, so there's a very small percentage of the throttle blade that can be opened from here in the event that the throttle motor shut down for whatever reason, whether it was incorrect signals from the TPS, incorrect signals from the accelerator position sensor, whatever it may be. If the throttle has to shut down, then basically you still have this small section to open. And when I say small, it's a very, very small throttle opening. Okay. And then lastly, coming out here, we then have our Lambda sensor for bank 2. Okay, so that's 4, 5, 6. There's the Lambda sensor. Now, please be aware, this is just an aftermarket exhaust manifold I found on eBay for the engine. This is not standard. The positioning will obviously be different in your one if you have a completely standard manifold. You've got all the cats and everything in there as well. So anyway, but that's the plug that goes into the Lambda sensor for 4, 5, and 6. Okay. Right, so moving back to over here, you can see it breaks down and comes down the front over here. So I may have to sort of get down here. But yeah, so it comes down here and it breaks out here sort of around the alternator over there. Okay, so a couple of sections that come off here. First of all, we have our crank sensor. So that goes over there. You can see the wire runs down there and goes to the crank sensor that's actually by the crank. Okay, next up is your alternator plug. So this is obviously going to go into your alternator. It's a 3-pin connector, the oval style, really simple and straightforward. Then we have our Lambda sensor. Now this is for bank 1, so cylinder 1, 2, 3, and you can see I've got it plugged in over there. Okay, so again, your positioning might be different, but whatever Lambda sensor is the first Lambda sensor for cylinder 1, 2, and 3, that goes to this plug over here. Now luckily for you guys, it's a different plug from the one up there. Okay, so you can't actually mix them up. They have to go into the correct way. All right. Then also coming out there is going to be your alternator wire. So remember guys, on the IS300, not the GS300, on the IS300, the alternator wire as standard is built into the engine harness, okay? GS300, it is not built into the engine harness, but with this case it is. So obviously we leave it in, we just tape it up with the rest of it over there and make it nice and simple. So this is the one you're going to bolt to the alternator itself, okay? Really nice and super simple. And the last one that comes out over here is going to be this one, which snakes up over here and goes to your mass airflow sensor. Okay, right, so with the 2JZ, you guys have to be careful depending on which model you've got. Obviously the IS300, now I'm going to talk about European and Japanese model, I suppose not Japanese models, but anyway, the European models and so on, we only had the IS300 from 2001 to 2005, okay? And that means that pretty much all of them came with this small style mass airflow sensor, okay? The problem comes is when you look at the GS300. Now the GS300 ran from 98 to 2005, but in 2001 they had a changeover. So if you bear with me a second, I actually have an early generation GS300 airbox here, which I'll show you. And that's that over there, okay? You'll recognize this airflow meter as well if you have an Aristo 2JZ-GE VVT-i. Same style, just with a green sticker on rather than a black and a white one, okay? So again, be super careful and always make sure that you have the correct mass airflow sensor for your ECU, okay? If you have an IS300 that has the wedge shape style one like this one, 99% chance it's going to be this one over here. If you have a GS300 one and you are not 100% sure, then check the ECU and make sure whether you had this one or whether you had that one, okay? This one was from 98 to 2001 and this one was from 2001 to 2005. Okay, and that applies to the US as well. Luckily, you US guys on the GS300 of 2001, you got the same wedge shape ECU, but in Europe, we kept the old rectangular shape. So looking externally at a European GS300, you cannot tell the difference between a 98 and a 2004 because the ECUs are exactly the same shape and everything. But you need to be super careful because there are two major differences. This wiring over here is completely different from this wiring over here. So if your car originally came with this and you plug this mass airflow sensor in, I think you're going to blow up the intake air temperature sensor because it's going to feed 12 volts directly down the intake air temperature sensor, and vice versa. If you have this one, but your harness is this one and you plug it in the wrong way, you're going to do basically the same thing, okay? So on the GS300, you have a different math. You also have the lack of Tiptronic, or E-shift as some people call it. And also on the 2001 to 2005 GS300, same as the IS300, you have the power steering pressure sensor and not the switch. Okay, so on IS200 on your power steering pump, you see you've got a little gray plug, that's a switch, so it's on and off. On the GS300 98 to 2001, they also had a switch, so again, single wire and only on or off, but the later generations had an actual sensor, so it's actually sensing the pressure in the power steering, okay? And it's using that to do things like pick up the idle and so on and so forth for the, because obviously it's drive-by-wire, so it can increase idle if the power steering is under a lot of pressure. Right, okay, so I have gone pretty much as far as I can, except for, we can do the gearbox section, sorry guys. So at the end of the plastic here, which you'll see in a minute, because I'll take the intake manifold off. At the end of the plastic here, it goes down through there. There's a clip over there. Yours might not still be on your engine, but if it is, you can clip it in there. Goes down along through there, breaks up over here, and it goes into two sections. One is going to go to your selector switch. That'll actually be on the left side of the gearbox, or sorry, the right side of the gearbox. So driver's side if it's a right-hand drive car. Then you have the input speed sensor, which is that one over there. And that's going to go on the passenger side of the gearbox, or the left-hand side of the gearbox if it is a right-hand drive car. Passenger side if it's a right-hand drive car. Then it's going to break off, go along down there, and at the very end you have your 12-pin solenoid connector, and that's at the back of the gearbox, again on the left side or the passenger side if it's a right-hand drive vehicle, and the speed sensor is kind of directly along with the solenoid plug, so they're very close to each other so you can't miss them. So there is only 4 plugs for the gearbox. Input speed sensor at the front, selector on the other side, and then those two again on the left-hand side but at the back, okay? 3 plugs on the left-hand side, 1 plug on the right-hand side. That's all there is for the gearbox. Okay, right, so bear with me a second. It'll only be a second for you guys. I'll be back in a minute and I'm gonna have the intake off and we'll go through that section that goes underneath there. See you in a second. Right guys, so we're back again, and as I said, inlet manifold has now come off. So let's take a look at what's going on underneath there and we can show you better the ignition coils as well. Right, so as you can see here, harness bolts on over there. Section of without the plastic bit over there, we just taped up over there. So what comes out here is your oil control valve, which I showed you earlier. You have your noise filter. Again, so that's the one that plugs in over here. We then have injector 1 and we then have injector 2. And lastly, we have our TPS again, which I showed you goes into the throttle over there, okay? Now, the nice thing with the JZ engines is basically the injector plugs are color-coded, okay? So there is gray, brown, and brown, okay? So that's how you tell what goes where. So first color is gray, but obviously this wire is slightly longer than this one, so this one wouldn't actually reach to there, so it's kind of a good indication, and it's a good place to start, okay? So again, injector 1, injector 2, all right? Moving along to here, have a little section that pops out over there, and that's going to be injector 3. So I've got these loose on for the testing later, and injector 4. Okay, so again, I'm not clipping these in because I got to remove them as part of the testing of the harness. Moving along, we then come to the end over here, and all the rest of the stuff comes out over here. So we have injector 5, we have our cam sensor over there, we have injector 6 over there. Just make sure that one is loose. Injector 6 over there. We then have our evap solenoid, which again was plugged into the evap solenoid, which goes over there. So remember, that's the one that goes to the breather of the tank. So on your IS200, you have that little thing that pops up there. You got a little black box and goes in there. So that's what goes into the evap solenoid over there. And then obviously, lastly, you have the section that pops down to the gearbox, which we've already gone through. And you can get a closer look here at the little section that pops out over there. Oh, sorry, hang on. Let me try and get this camera to move into the right place here. What are you doing? Okay, but you can see the plastic over there. Okay, and obviously the other earth that I spoke about earlier there. Right, so looking at the coils, just to give a better explanation of what I said earlier, but you can see there is your first coil at the front of the engine, but that actually goes onto cylinder 2. There's your plug over there. That goes onto cylinder number 4, and then has a short little loop to go to cylinder number 3. And then lastly, the coil at the back here, that actually goes to cylinder number 6. And obviously has a long cord which runs all the way along there, and that goes to the front coil, okay? So basically they're paired because they're wasted spark. So remember that there's only 3 coils and 6 cylinders, so you're running wasted spark. So they're paired as 1 and 6, 2 and 5, 4 and 3, okay? So that's the pairing of the ignition coils there. All right, so hopefully that's relatively straightforward. Obviously, I wanted to pull the inlet manifold off so you can actually see how this goes. And by the way, there's a little bolt over there to bolt it down, and there's a little nut over there. So these are actual studs that are in the manifold. So you've got to slide this over and then put the 2 nuts on there, 10mm socket, and basically the same as that one over there, okay? Right, so that's that done. So I'm gonna get everything back together again now. We'll pop back, and then we're gonna go and start the testing. So let's do that now. Right, guys, so everything's back together now. Let's jump into the testing. So testing is made up of 2 sections, which I'm going to go through now each of the tests so you can see exactly what we're going to do. But it's one with the ignition on and one with the engine actually running. So let's start with the one with the ignition on. This is quite a large one compared to what you guys normally see. But first of all, we're going to do immobilizer removal. So obviously in this case, we have removed the immobilizer from the ECU. Obviously, we still keep the security light attached. So if people walk past your car, they do think you still have an immobilizer, but you don't have an immobilizer anymore. You could ram a screwdriver in the ignition barrel and start the car, no problems whatsoever. Okay, next up is ambient temperature. Super simple, it's just the outside temperature. So it will be displayed on the climate control over there. So we're looking for that to be displaying an actual temperature signal. Next up is check engine light, charge light, and oil pressure. So again, check engine lights at the top, charge lights over there, and oil pressure lights over there. You obviously do have oil level, which is at the top over there. In this case, I've obviously removed the bulb because again, I use these a lot of things that don't use oil level, like GTEs and aftermarket ECUs and so on and so forth. But yeah, your oil level will work, okay? The only thing that won't work is your TRC, because remember the IS300 had VSC, which is way more complicated and way more advanced than the TRC that came with the IS200. TRC, in no uncertain terms, basically all it did was shut the throttle down if it lost traction. VSC is much more advanced. You have steering angle sensors, you have yaw rate sensors inside the car. It's just a big step above TRC that comes on the IS200. So please do remove the TRC bulb from your dash on your IS200, okay? This is actually an IS300 harness, but obviously I need to use this because we've got our gear position display, and it's pretty important when we're doing the testing, which you'll see later on with all the gear positions on there. Okay, so that's those 2 over there. Then obviously these are for manuals, so not applicable. And then we've got OBD2 test. Basically, we're going to show that the machine connects and so on and so forth. And the machine is connected to the standard OBD2 plug inside the vehicle. So nothing fancy, nothing's changed. You plug in exactly like you would when it was an IS200. You'll get all the same data, and it still communicates with ABS, ECU, etc. Fuel pump relay. So again, on this particular case, the ECU controls the fuel pump. I do have a bunch of links down in the description of a bunch of videos about topics like this, like how the fuel pump system works, because they don't prime the fuel pump with the ignition on. Now, you'll be surprised when people will drive an IS200 for 5-6 years and never realize that their fuel pump is never primed. The second you come to an engine swap and all of a sudden it's the only thing you notice is that the fuel pump doesn't work when you turn the ignition on, okay? That is perfectly normal. The fuel pump only works in certain conditions. Please click that link down below in the description, and I did a whole video explaining exactly how everything works. So I go into great detail on that one, okay? Next up is AC clutch. So you want to make sure that if I test the AC magnetic clutch through the ECU, that the relay clicks, and we've actually got the air compressor pump clicked in. So obviously you'll actually hear the AC pump come together. Next up is AC request. So all we're basically going to do is we're going to, again, look at our OBD2 machine. We're going to press the AC button over there, and we're going to see that the AC signal goes from being off to on. We'll press the button again, and it'll go back to being off again, okay? After that, we're going to do brake switch. So again, as I've said multiple times before, the IS200 in manual came only with a 2-wire brake switch. The IS200 Auto came with a 4-wire brake switch, but obviously we don't want to limit you guys if you ever wanted to sell these harnesses on. So for the brake switch, like the IS300s, the 3UZs, we fitted a relay inside here, and that imitates the 4-wire brake switch. So although technically in this particular case, the customer's got an IS200 Auto, and technically speaking, we could have had both the signals directly to the ECU from there. We obviously don't want to limit him. If he ever wants to sell this on to somebody else, and they've got an IS200 manual and they want to fit this in with the auto box, I don't know why, but again, I don't ask questions, but they will be able to with an IS200 manual chassis. Okay. Next up, we've got our gear selector / shifter wiring. So what we're basically going to do is we're going to go over to our selector there, and we're going to show you that all the gear positions are working correctly. And there is some quirks in putting an IS200 into an IS200, which I'll go through as well at the time. Okay. Next up is power and snow mode. Now then, if you have an IS200, you will know that there is no power and snow mode button on an IS200. There is only a TRC and a snow button on an IS200. As far as I'm aware, I don't even think the auto versions might have a power and a snow button, but the manuals I think definitely don't. So there is a way of doing it. You literally just have to change one wire, as you can see that I've done there, and you can fit this power and snow mode button in place of the TRC and snow button. So I'm going to show you on the dash that they do actually work. We're going to put in power mode, we're going to put in snow mode, and you're going to see the lights come on the dash to show you that that is the case, okay? Then we're going to move on to the engine running, okay? So that's going to be starter circuits. So again, I'm going to be testing that if it's in drive or two or drive or whatever, if it's not in park or neutral, that it won't start, okay? So we'll move the shifter to the reverse position. We'll then try and turn the key, and we'll see that it doesn't crank over or start, and then we'll put it back into park or neutral, and we'll crank it over, and you'll see the engine's going to fire up into life. Just making sure that that neutral park switch is working correctly, so the vehicle will not start unless it's in park or neutral. ACIS. Now in this particular case, I'm actually going to do the test through the OBD2 machine, but right here in the middle, that's your ACIS valve, and all that's going to basically happen is when I test it, it's just going to go and then boom, move like that, okay? Really simple test, nothing major there. Drive-by-wire test. As I said, this is a drive-by-wire system, so all I want to do is I want to rev it up just like that, because we already know that that movement over there is not touching the throttle blade at all. So if it revs up when I do that, we know the drive-by-wire is working 100%. Next up, we want to test the oil control valve for the VVT-i. So remember, here's our oil control valve. And just like the IS200 1GFE and the 1UZ VVT-i and the 3UZ VVT-i, they're only controlling the inlet cam. So you can see that's why it's on here. It's just the inlet cam. And the machine will basically advance and retard the cam, so the engine will sound really lumpy. So I've got to do it while the engine's a little bit cold. Otherwise, the RPM is not high enough at idle to obviously then keep the engine running, because it's a 6-cylinder straight. So unfortunately, I do it when it's a little bit colder. That's why it's pretty close on the list of things once we start it up, to make sure that test will carry out, because sometimes the engine dies when you do the test, and it's really annoying because I've got to restart it again and so on. Then it's going to be injectors and coils. So all I'm going to do, like you saw earlier, the injectors aren't actually plugged in all the way. They're not clicked in, so they're easy access. I'm going to basically pull out each injector one by one. You're going to hear the cylinder misfire, and that's going to show us that every cylinder is firing exactly as it should. But obviously when it's running, you'll hear it's quite smooth. But the JZ is a very loud engine when you compare it to the UZ engine. So obviously I don't know how much you're going to hear when it is actually running, but you should hear the misfire. It's quite pronounced. Then we're going to go to tacho. So we're going to take a look at our tacho rev counter over there. Now, obviously, IS300 to IS200 are both 6 cylinders, so we just take the tacho feed directly from the ECU to the cluster. No problems there at all. It doesn't need to be translated in any shape or form like it does for the 3UZ, so really straightforward and simple. Coolant temp, so what we'll probably do is when you're going to first start the engine, you're going to see the coolant temp's going to be either just off the needle or not moving at all. By the time we finish all the testing, we'll come back and fingers crossed, the coolant temperature should have moved up, so we can actually see that it increases, which is what we're looking for there. And then lastly, we're going to do diagnostics, so what you can and can't do, how to do diagnostics, etc. All right, so that's really nice and simple and straightforward. So first of all, let's test the immobilizer removal. So I've done videos of other ones where I've kept the immobilizer for things, but basically the way that it would normally work in a car, obviously we've removed the immobilizer, but I'm going to imitate how it works in a car. And effectively, it's going to look for the key the second I insert the key, okay? So basically, I'm going to try and see if I can get it all in one shot there. You can see the security light. I'm just going to insert the key. And you can see that the security light has stopped flashing, okay? I haven't turned the key to the on position or anything like that. The second you insert the key, you actually heard the relay, you heard the relay actually activate over there just from the key being inserted. It turns on the plus B circuit, which energizes the antenna, which reads the key. So the ECU's actually read the key before you even turn the ignition on. The second you insert the key, it's already read it, said it's happy, and off it goes, okay? But obviously in this case, this is just any old key. I'm trying to see if I can find another one here. Yep, there you go, Bogger standard key. Again, I just insert it, and you can see there that the security light is going out. Okay, so again, there is no mobilizer in this one. It has been removed, but obviously, I still keep the security light working because it's just a nice feature. If people watch your car, they think you've got an immobilizer still. Right, let's put the ignition on. So again, it's a plug and play. Just going to turn the key. There you go. You can see everything is on. You can hear the throttle buzzing away there, and ambient temperature. 18 degrees, fantastic. So that's what the temperature here is now, and we know it's reading, so we're happy with that. Then check engine light, charge light, and oil pressure. So we've got check engine light, we've got charge light, and we've got oil pressure light. You'd normally have your oil level light up here. Again, I've just moved the bulb because of all the tests that we normally do. But that's that. Okay, so OBD2 test. Obviously, this machine takes absolutely ages to load up, so I have already loaded up. You can see it is determining that it is an IS300, so we're super happy with that. Okay. Right, so fuel pump relay is our next test, which we're going to do through the machine. So let's jump into that now. So you want to go under active test. And you'll see fuel pump relay and fuel pump. That will make sense. If you watch my video on fuel pumps, you'll understand why there's two there. Okay. And we're going to go into that. And I'm going to keep quiet now because I'm going to turn on the fuel pump and hopefully you can hear it. Okay, let's move closer to there. Fantastic. Okay, super happy with that. Obviously, the ECU is controlling the fuel pump. So again, it turns it on and off through the machine, no problem whatsoever. Right, so that's fuel pump. Let's move over to AC clutch, and that's also an active test on my little system here. So let's go into active test. We've got AC magnetic clutch relay, really straightforward. Sorry, guys. And again, I'm just going to turn it on and off, so I'm going to keep quiet now. Right, okay, so I'm going to move it over there because the relay is actually in that fuse box over there. And hopefully you can actually hear the magnetic clutch engaging. Hopefully you can see some of it. Right, okay, anyway, that's working 100%. Super happy with that, nothing worried there. Right, let's go on to AC request. Okay, so that basically is going to be the signal coming from the car. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of a bunch of this other information that we really do not need on this. This is going to slow down the rate of communication. So all we're looking for now is AC signal. Should be down here. AC signal. And I'll just put stop light on so long as well, because that's going to be one of the next tests that we are going to do. So at the moment, AC signal is off. Hopefully you can see that. AC signal off. Let's pop over here. Press the AC button. And you can see AC signal is now turned to on. Okay, fantastic. Let's turn that off. AC signal has gone back to being off. Super happy with that. That means the ECU data coming from the car to the ECU to tell us to turn the AC on is working 100%. Fantastic. Right, after that, we've got brake switch. So again, like with the 3UZ, if you've seen any of those videos, we're just going to imitate the brake signal. This is your STP wire, which is what comes from inside the vehicle to tell you that you're pressing the brakes. I'm going to insert this into here and keep quiet a second. You can hear the relay click away there. And stoplight switch is turned to on. Let's pull that out. Hear the relay click away there again. Stoplight switch is now off again. Fantastic. Exactly what I want to happen. Just for your information, obviously the relay has 5 connections because there's a wire that needs 12 volts when the brakes are not pressed, and there's a wire that needs 12 volts when the brakes are pressed. Okay. And most importantly, obviously, that's important for the cruise control. This customer obviously has an IS200 Auto, so we have connected cruise control, so that will work with this ECU, so there's nothing to worry about there. And obviously, in order for the cruise control to work, you need those 2 brake signals, so we needed to make sure that that was 100%. Okay. Right, so after the brake switch, we've got gear selector shifter wiring. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly move this gearbox wiring over. Let's see if I can do it from that side, and it'll be nice and straightforward to see on there. Okay, so I'm just going to pass the camera with the other hand, but it's so you can see exactly what's happening there. So we've got park, we've got reverse, we've got neutral, we've got drive, and that's another quirk I'm going to go through now. We've got 3, and we've got 2. Okay, so those are the mechanical movements on the gearbox. Okay, remember IS200 is 4-speed, 3UZ is 5-speed. Okay, so that's that over there. So one thing I want to show you quickly as well is the reason that you have a slotted hole over here. So if you have a look here, it is a slotted hole. It's not a round one. Okay, there is a bolt there that you can then adjust that thingy. So I'm going to show you what happens, and you'll see here, if I just move this, there you go. So there it is. I haven't moved over to the next gear position yet, but the signal has actually been lost. So at the moment, the ECU doesn't know what gear it is in at all. There's absolutely no signals to the ECU as to what gear it's in, okay? This becomes important because if you have the dash showing gear position, obviously that is fantastic. Obviously, when you've installed everything and you've got your rod going to the shifter from the shifter inside the vehicle to the selector over there, because that obviously has a rod that pops up over there attached to the pole that goes to the shifter there. What you should probably do is once you've finish everything, just make sure that when you move through the gear positions that everything gets highlighted there, so it is actually showing the position. That's perfect. But what you also want to do is you want to boot it, okay? Boot it to put the engine at a max torsion, okay? So it's going to twist like that, and what will happen is that'll show you very quickly if this selector is basically on the cusp of not connecting anymore, okay? So what will basically happen is as soon as you boot it, you'll see that all the gear positions disappear. If that happens, jump underneath the car, loosen that bolt over there, adjust it slightly, tighten it up again, and repeat the procedure until every time you boot it, the actual gear position does not go away. That's what you want to do. If the gear position goes away, the ECU gets very unhappy because obviously there's no gear position at all. Okay. Right, so there's another couple of quirks that we have here in relation to the gear position. Okay, so again, you'll see we've got park, reverse, neutral, drive, then we go to 3 and we go to 2. Okay, so in this case, if this was an IS300, your M or /4, which is how the Toyota refer to it, M or /4 and L are actually electronic signals. Now, so we come in a little bit of a quirk when you do an IS200 engine into an IS200 and keep the auto. Problem is with the IS200, it's a 4-speed, okay? So it only has the wiring capabilities built into the car of being able to go park, reverse, neutral, drive. Now in the IS200, it'll go 3 to L, okay? So your mechanical positions in an IS200 is park, reverse, neutral, drive, 2 and L, okay? You move the gear from drive over to 3 and then down to 2 and L, okay? So what happens in an IS300 is you kind of have to make some sacrifices, okay? So in this particular case, when he puts it in his car, it's going to go park, reverse, neutral, drive. If he moves it over to 3, what's actually going to happen is it's going to go into 4/manual mode, okay? Now that's another quirk. You don't have any shift up, shift down buttons in an IS200, okay? But he can go then down to 3 and 2, but in this case, unless there's some extensive wiring or some wiring done inside the vehicle, we can't actually access L. There's no built-in wiring inside the car. It has to physically be added in, okay? So there is options that you can retain it, but we can't build it into the engine harness because it's just not physically possible because the wires do not exist inside the car. They needed to be added. So it can't be done remotely. It has to be done in the vehicle. And this applies for 2 things. 1, being able to access L or first gear low, all right? The second one is being able to access shift up, shift down, okay? It is built into the ECU and there's absolutely no problems whatsoever with it, and you can make it work, okay? But we'll need to send you 2 wires with ECU terminals on, okay? That you can then put into the ECU, that you'll have to run inside the vehicle, and you'll have to get a steering wheel from an IS300 or a GS300 later generation model. You'll then have to change the clock spring. You'll then have to have everything coming out the other side, and you'll have to connect a ground and shift up, shift down, and all the way through there. To access L mode, you'll have to swap out your IS200 shifter for your IS300 shifter, okay? Once you've done that, we'll have to add an extra wire in and make some changes on the harness to get the L to work, because we've then got to feed to the shifter, okay, to then feed L with 12 volts, okay? So if you do want to make that work, yes, it is possible, but I'll have to talk you through the whole process because it's got to be done on the vehicle. We cannot do it remotely. It is just not possible because the wiring does not exist. It has to be added to inside of the vehicle, okay? So please be aware of that, guys. Or in this customer in case, please be aware of that. If you want L and you want shift up down to work, you need to do some modification into your vehicle, and we'll need to talk you through exactly how to wire that all up. And we will need to supply you with some sort of 2 wires with ECU terminals to go in for shift up, shift down. We have to supply you with a wire with ECU terminal to go to L. We have to show you where to tap into 2, and so on and so forth. It's quite extensive. If it is not that much of a bother to you and you're going to sitting and drive, by all means stick with that. But if you do want to add that functionality, it is a big job that has to be done on the vehicle itself. Okay, so that's kind of the quirks with the gear position. I wanted to make sure you're aware of that. So if you just keep the IS200 standard, you can have park, reverse, neutral, drive. If you move over to what is 3 on your IS200 shifter, it's going to go into what they call manual mode or 4 mode. And then moving down, you're then going to go 3 and 2, okay? You're not going to go to L. Okay, happy? Everyone's happy with that? Great. Right, let's move over to the power and snow mode button. So basically all I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my button here, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to press power, and you can see power mode is activated there. I'm going to press snow, and you can see snow mode is activated there. So there again, that all works absolutely fine. Luckily the communication for MPX between IS200 and IS200 is exactly the same. No dramas there whatsoever. All right, so that is the testing with the ignition on. Obviously, we've been going for about 20 minutes now, so this is a lot when you have an auto there on there. But what I'm going to do now is we're going to pop back. We're going to do the testing with the engine running. So I'll see you in a second. Right, so we're back again. We're going to do the test with the engine running. I've let it warm up a teeny little bit so you can actually see that the coolant temperature gauge is just off the needle there, not too far. Again, so when we do the coolant temperature, we can actually see it rise up as we go along. I'm going to do a really quick recap of what we're going to be doing. So first of all, it's going to be starter circuit. So at the moment you see it's in park, I'm going to move it over to reverse. We're going to try and start it. It's not going to start. I'm going to move it back to park again. It's going to start. Fantastic. ACIS, we're going to jump into the OBD2 machine here. We're going to activate the ACIS, and you're going to see that valve move down as I do that. Drive-by-wire test, super simple. We're just going to rev it. If it revs, super happy. Oil control valve test, again, we'll move over to the machine. We'll make the oil control valve run through a cycle. It advances retards the cam, it'll make it sound really lumpy. All done. Injectors and coils, I'm going to go around and just remove each injector one by one so you can hear the engine misfire, so we know each cylinder is firing as it should do. Then we'll come back and look at the tacho. We can actually see the engine speed from here against what's on there, and it'll be obviously accurate. Then we'll look at the coolant temperature. So we'll come back, and obviously this would have risen from where it is now. That's what we want to see. So we can see the coolant temperature is going up as the engine warms up. And then lastly, we'll do diagnostics and what we can do there. Okay, so let's first of all, ear protection on, because these are very, very loud engines. We're going to move it from park to reverse. Okay, and let's move the key. Completely dead, nothing working at all. Okay. Let's go over to park. Wrong direction there. 1, 2, 3. There you go. Fantastic. Okay. Starter circuit. Brilliant. All right. Now I'm going to go, and I'm actually in the intake control backside of my test. So I'm just going to turn it. engine was too warm there. Alrighty, let's start her up again. Okay, but that does work, exactly what I expected to happen. Let's move over to injectors and coils here. Alright, so cylinder 1, cylinder 2, there we have something you can see there. There's number 4 inside there. Let's go over to number 5. And number 6. Fantastic. Everything's working as we expect it to. Let's go over to tacho so you can see it's just over sort of 1 there. 135. Brilliant. No problem at all there. And let's give it a little rev. Fantastic. Okay. Coolant temperature. Well, you can clearly see it's risen up now, and we've got about 50 to 66 degrees, which is absolutely perfect. Okay. And let me just shut this off. Rightio. Okay, so everything's working exactly like I expected to. Like I said, with the oil control valve test, because it's an inline 6, and we're doing that with the entire inlet cam for the whole engine. I did it warm up a little bit too much. The RPM wasn't high enough for it to survive that thingy. If you want to see how lumpy it sounds, you can go to one of our UZ videos, and I do the same test on the 1 and 3 UZ VVT-i. You can see how the engine goes all lumpy as the cam changes its duration, advance and retard. Not duration, sorry, advance and retard. Okay, very careful then. Okay, so everything's working exactly as it should. Super happy with that. She runs smooth. Obviously, I didn't get to full working temperature, so you can see the idle was a little bit high, about sort of 1.3, perfectly normal for that sort of error. The drive-by-wire can learn as well, so sometimes when you first stick it in, like with this one, when we first stick them in, they go, sometimes I idle about 2,200 RPM or something like that. Look, it's not a perfect setup. Obviously, I've got loads of vacuum ports here that are open. The gasket's been taken off like 1,000,000 times as well. So bear in mind, obviously, that could affect the way that it runs on my side. But I would say 1.3 when it's cold, sort of 50, 60 degrees, I wouldn't be worried about that too much. It'll calm down as soon as you obviously get it up to running temperature. Okay, now then, diagnostics. Okay, so 3UZ IS300 2JZ VVT-i. You need to use an OBD2 machine, okay? OBD2 connect or diagnostic tool, whatever you want to call it, and basically plug into your OBD2 port over here, right? And it's going to give you all the codes that come up, okay? Now, importantly, you probably noticed that we had the check engine light on when it was running, and that's perfectly fine because we haven't got any of the solenoids connected for the automatic gearbox. This has not been remapped for a manual swap, it's been remapped for an auto swap. So that's why you heard when I was revving it, it's quite peppy. Obviously, we made the throttle response much better as part of the remap as well. Okay, but diagnostic trouble codes. I'm going to show you basically, I think we've got about 7 codes on here, which is solenoid 1, 2, 3, and 4. And SLT, SLU, and SLN. So those are all the solenoids for the 5-speed gearbox. So as I said, solenoid number 1, 2, 3, 4, SLU, SLT, and SLN. So those are 7 codes. So basically, once you plug the gearbox in, there'll be absolutely no codes whatsoever. So the check engine light will go off. So we have remapped out the secondary Lambda sensors. They are gone. We've also removed the plug from the harness entirely. That is now gone, okay? So you don't have to worry about the secondary Lambda sensors after the catalytic converter. So if you wanted to run no cats with this harness, it is absolutely fine. You're gonna get no check engine light and so on. What you choose to do in your country or your state or your applicable laws is completely up to you. I'm not giving you advice, but I'm saying that if you ran this without cats, you would not get a check engine light, okay? Gotta be careful with that. Right, so that's all been done, and that's how you do diagnostics. Now, with the older models, you could obviously bridge 2 terminals and you get the check engine light to flash and give you codes and all that type of stuff. And that's really cool, but obviously that got taken away with sort of European and American models. American models much earlier, even as early as the 1UZ VVT-i got taken away. But yeah, Japan carried that on right the way through. All their 3UZs still do the same system. You can bridge 2 wires and flash the check engine light and do the old system where you count it, you know, like 2 and 4 is 24, and that's intake air temperature sensor and so on. So you cannot get codes with flashing in these newer ones, especially for European and US models, but there's not entirely useless bridging those 2 terminals, because what it will still do, and this works with 3UZ as well, is it will still allow you to check your timing. And what I mean by that is, if you have a timing light, you can wrap it around cylinder number 1 here, okay? And down here, you can see we've got 0, 5, 10, and 15 degrees. Obviously, you've got your timing marks there on the cam, okay? And you'll have a similar white mark on the crank pulley. Let's see if I can find it, if I've been lucky. Okay, there's one of the timing marks and there's the other one down there. Okay, that's another unique feature with the 2JZ. There's actually two timing marks, and one of them is in relation to changing the timing belt. So please make sure that one's usually like a yellow color. Again, this is like original from factory. The one's usually like a yellow color and the one is usually like a white color. It's the white color one that you want to access in order to do that. Okay, check the timing. You don't want to do it on the yellow one because that's way off. Okay, so if you're unsure, check the manual on changing timing belts for the 2JZ, and if you need it, I do have all the Toyota documentation for changing timing belts. I'm more than happy to send it to you, and it'll actually show you the two different marks and how they go. But if you bridge those two terminals, which is pin 4 and 13, basically 4 and 5 are two grounds, so it's ground, and then 13 is TC, which is trouble codes. If you bridge those together, you'll put the ECU still into diagnostic mode. It'll lock the timing at 10 degrees. Now, as you can imagine, don't leave that wire in there because you're going to lock the timing at 10 degrees and you're going to have absolutely no power on the engine. So please be aware, if you are doing that and you are taking off the, you are trying to check the timing with a timing light to see if it is accurate, then by all means do that. But when you're finished, make sure that you pull that wire out so you don't have the timing locked at 10 degrees. Okay, it's bad time. You will notice it very, very quickly. All right. So diagnostics overview. You can only use a machine. You have to use a machine to get the codes. If the check engine light comes on when this vehicle is driving with this harness, then there is actually a problem that needs to be resolved. So again, get a machine plugged in and get the codes, see what the issue is and start working on them. Now, a little note with diagnostics that we've come across, and if you hang around IS200 forums and so on and so forth, is OBD2 is a universal protocol across every single vehicle, okay? So manufacturers have a set number of codes that they have to work with, okay? They can't change them or anything like that, but what they can do is they can make the meaning of them something weird and is not related to the actual problem, okay? I'm going to give you a prime example with this one. I think it's the one where you get a code saying that the coolant temperature is insufficient for closed loop fueling or something like that. And you think it's the coolant temperature sensor, but it actually has nothing to do with the coolant temperature sensor. So again, I do have the entire diagnostic chart sheet from a GS300 that'll give you every single P code. Okay, so you see here like P1755, it'll P0100 or whatever. I've got a sheet that runs through all of the P codes and it'll tell you exactly what it means, what the cause could be, and whether it causes a limp mode, etc., etc. Okay, so if you ever need that, please feel free to shout and I will send that to you, absolutely no problem at all. Okay, right, but I think that's it. It's been a long video. Hopefully you guys have stuck around. If you have, you'll get some photos of what it looked like before and what we did with it and what it looked like after when we were completed and so on. But thanks for watching, guys. If you have any questions, please let me know. More than happy to help you out. Like I said in the previous video, we've actually got a video for you guys that have queries with us to try and help you get us the information that we need to carry out a quote or give you advice or so on and so forth. So fingers crossed that's going to work now. If you send us a query on Facebook, you'll get an automatic response. If you send a query via email, I have to physically respond to you, so that might take a little while. I do apologize about that, but I'll put a link in the email to that video going through exactly what information we need from you guys. Okay, but again, any questions, please feel free to ask, comment down below. I try and get to the comments as often as I can. I'll try and answer people as often as I can. I have entire playlists of things like Link, ECU Master, whatever. Again, if there's anything there that you want to take a look at, just feel free to go to the playlist and go from there. And obviously at the end of the video, you'll see our IS200 300 Altezza playlist will be recommended to you as well. So it goes through every single harness that we do as a plug and play to an IS200 300 or Altezza. But thanks for watching, guys. I got to get this packed up. It's off to Australia. Guy wants to get his car running, so let's do that. And we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Never break, always fight, never quit, do it right, play the game, win it life, have no shame, there's no time, feel the pain, live the grind, I could change, in my mind, pick a lane, commit and climb, the only way to win it life, I never miss.